And hello, my fabulous students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I'm excited to be with you today. Today we're going to discuss the Neolithic Revolution and its effects on humans. So, prior to the Neolithic Revolution, we had the Paleolithic era. The Paleolithic era was basically an era where humans started migrating throughout the whole world, and they started growing into small bands and forming hunting-gatherer societies. And something significant's going to happen here. So here we have this individual. This is a Paleolithic man. He's a hunter-gatherer, cave dweller. But in the Neolithic era, there's going to be a shift that is going to lead from this to this. Woohoo! We're going to go from being so uncivilized to eventually becoming civilized, to staying in one place, to having plenty of food to eat, and building social complex structures of society. So let's talk about this. So the Neolithic or agricultural revolution, it is in response to the warming climates at the end of the Ice Age. Remember, the Ice Age came about 100,000 BCE. The earth got really cold. People had to start banding together, searching for food by hunting mostly, because there wasn't a lot of plants. Because if you've noticed, when the climate is colder, plants tend to not really grow. So with the cooler weather dissipating and the warmer weather rising, we have amazing changes happening, including plants that are starting to show up. People are starting to see green again. And by seeing green again, they're realizing that, hey, maybe we don't have to keep following the animals. Maybe we can start foraging or gathering more. And something amazing happens in this process. They realize that they can domesticate plants. Domestication is just a fancy word for use. So warmer weather aided plants to grow more easily. Eventually, humans discovered that they could obtain food by putting seeds in the ground. Who would have thought? Thus, early humans determined that they did not have to hunt animals to obtain food as much, but they could now grow it. This is revolutionary. This is going to change the very way which they will live in their bands, and eventually their bands will grow into towns, into villages, and to cities. Because of this very thought that they can grow their own food. They don't have to chase it anymore. This revolutionary way of thinking is going to change nomadic life to a more stationary life. So they also learned they could domesticate animals. Again, domestication is just a fancy word for use for the betterment of their everyday life. Since food was now grown, humans hunted animals less and tamed them for farm life. Thus, you have the dog. Now, the dog is considered to be the first animal to ever be domesticated. They used it for hunting, and they also used it for warning of danger. Usually dogs start barking if something's around, and you knock on the door, someone has a dog. So the dogs were good to kind of warn you if there's any danger about, and you could be on your guard. Another animal is said to be the second animal most likely domesticated is the goat, because the goat can provide both meat and milk. And then we got cattle, horses, sheep, pigs, and they can provide a slew of labor or food. And so now they're learning to use these animals. Instead of slaughtering them, let's use them to our advantage. So there also is, some people started growing in the ground, and some people started turning to pastoralism during the Neolithic Revolution. Pastoral peoples domesticated animals and led herds around grazing ranges. Like agriculturalists, pastoralists tended to be more socially stratified than hunter-foragers. Because pastoralists were mobile, they rarely accumulated large amounts of material possessions, which would have been a hindrance when you had to change grazing areas. So people started focusing mainly on herding animals and domesticating them. The problem is that if you did that, you had to keep moving every month or two to new greener pastures so that your animals could eat more food, because if they eat it all up in one area, then you got to move a few weeks out and find another place for them to go. So they're still wandering, and as a result, they have all their animals. They're not hanging on to a lot of stuff. The pastoralist mobility allowed them to become an important conduit for the technological change as they interacted, there's that key word, with settled populations who were agriculturalists. So, agriculture and pastoralism began to transform human societies. Pastoralism and agriculture led to more reliable and abundant food supplies, which increased population. See, typically, the more food you have, the more chances you have of having a higher population. People aren't going to be starving for food. Thus, if they're not starving, they're actually growing, and people can grow to mature age where they can eventually have children and raise families, etc. The more food that accumulated equals a surplus. And a surplus of food and other goods led to specialization of labor, including new classes of artisans, warriors, and development of elites and villages and cities. Bottom line, if you have more food, if you have extra food, you're not worried about dying. So you're not working as hard in the fields trying to survive if you have extra food. That means that when you're done working in the fields and you have all this food left, you can now explore hobbies. And those hobbies lead to side jobs and professions, artisans, blacksmiths, warriors, whatever. People started exploring what their passion was, which is what we tell you wonderful students to do when you go to college, explore your passions. That's what people started doing because they didn't have to worry about surviving anymore. They had plenty of food, as you can see in all that in the picture there with all that, the bags of extra food there, beans I believe those are. So surplus also led to government institutions to determine how best to use it for the betterment of the community. So with a lot of surplus, then there's leaders who rose and said, well, we should do this with the surplus and do this with our surplus. And they tried to use those surpluses to help better their society in case, unfortunately, they may fall on hard times and need that. So this also brought a lot of, because people had more free time on their hands because of a surplus, it brought a lot of technology. One, you got pottery, and pottery is simply just wet clay that they learned that they had to fire up. And if they fired it up, that wet clay would no longer be soft, it would be hard, and you could actually contain water and other things as well. So they have containers called pottery. Another one they found is the plow. They realized, hey, if we put this stick in the ground and we attach this plow to a cattle, then we can actually dig into the ground a nice line, and then we could just drop the seeds in rather we're just putting the seed in one at a time. It sped the farming process up, which meant now they can farm more land, they can get more food, and thus a surplus. Woven tiles is cotton and flax fibers. This starts first appearing around 6000 BCE. And so people are now in their spare time learning how to make clothes. Now we have metallurgy. Again, people have free time. They're exploring their passions. Some people liked what is this hard stuff that we now call metal. And they started using it, learning it, and people started making copper and copper armor, and eventually they figured out how to make bronze, but that's much later in history. And then wheels and vehicles. So we have the potter's wheel, which is just, I have a picture for you, and then we have the actual wheel that we use on our cars today. So this is a picture of a potter's wheel, if you take a look here in Sumeria. And so it sits flat, and you spin it around, and as you spin it around, you try to form your pottery. And then after it's formed like you see there, then you would put it into an oven and bake it so that it would harden, and then it was good for, putting wine or water or whatever else you wanted to do. And then on the right side, you could see this Sumerian plow, and it was also very helpful. And then social stratification. In both pastoralist and agrarian societies, elite groups accumulated wealth, creating more hierarchical or stratified social structures. So the more stuff people accumulated, the more they started separating themselves from the people who had a lot of things and the people who didn't. See, we didn't have this problem when they were hunting and gathering because you didn't want to hold on to a lot of stuff. If you did, you had to move it. Imagine if you had to move all your stuff every 3 weeks. You'd had to move your bed, your TV, your dresser, all that. Eventually, you're going to be like, this is so not worth it. And you're going to try to simplify your life so it's easier to be on the move. However, in agrarian or agricultural societies where they get to stay in one place and the food comes to them because they plant it, then they hang on to more stuff, and more stuff starts separating people from the haves and the have-nots, and eventually you form upper class, lower class, etc. And so that's it. Go ahead and write your one-page summary, and I look forward to discussing all this with you at when the time comes. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.